President John, visiting from the Lake Hickory Rotary Club, Floyd Lucas and Nancy Meek.
Welcome, Floyd and Nancy. Now, any guests of Rotarians on my right? Yes, Tony.
I have my wife, Cease, with me today.
Oh, okay, you'll take care of that later. Anyone else on the right here? Down the middle. Jan.
I have my sister Libby Willis here today. She's also Patrick McHenry's next door neighbor. We also have two staffers with us, Sean Joy, who is the Primary School's Chief of Staff, and Joe Boss.
Anyone on this side of the room? All right. We have a pretty... I'll walk slower so you can hand me better. Not make anyone dizzy when they watch this later. All right. We have a full program today, so we're not going to have a Rotary moment, but I did have a couple things to announce. First, we do have two birthdays, which are today. Alan Huffman and Mitzi Gelman both birthdays today. Mitzi, but Alan's over there. And then I had an update for you on one of our newest members, David Williams. His wife and 6-year-old son were in a car accident this weekend. They're both not seriously injured, and they got out of the hospital yesterday, but they have some recovery ahead of them. So please keep them in your prayers and in your thoughts and prayers. And now Tony Reed has our RILA students.
Thank you, President John. Today we have our RILA student, Lily Washburn, and she's going to give about a 2-minute video presentation, and then she'll give a little talk about her experience at RILA. For maybe some of the newer members, RILA is Rotary Youth Leadership Award. It's a camp that's held every summer over at Brevard, and it's a great thing for sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school to get some really good experiences in Rotary and leadership. The camp was held June 19th through the 25th this year, and we had 2 excellent campers. Their bios are in your program, and I think you'll be impressed. I won't go into them. You can read those. Yen Van was very sorry, but something came up late last night. She sent me an email. She could not make it, but maybe we'll have her at another meeting. Her brother, Finn, I think you might remember him, was our first Rotary RILA camper 3 or 4 years ago when we started the program for our club. And he's quite an impressive young man. So without further ado, and I'll let her introduce her mother who's here with her. We'll ask Lily to give her presentation.
You have to hold it like all the way up here.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lily Washburn, and I'm here today with my mom, Susan Washburn. I'm going to show you a little iMovie that I made to summarize my experience at RILA.
Just got to turn the mic. Bob. Okay.
to share an important experience I had at RILA that has inspired me to reach out to my community in a certain way. That night, after I went to the community garden, I emailed the director of servant leadership at my school, and here's what I said. Hi, Ms. Barnes. I hope you are having a great summer. I'm currently at a high school Rotary leadership camp in the North Carolina mountains. Today, I went to a community garden with the camp and worked with younger kids to harvest the produce in the garden. The food will go to a local food bank and to those in the community in need. This was by far my favorite activity. Another group from the camp went to the Boys and Girls Club where they also had a garden. They harvested produce that went home with the children's families. I was so inspired by the younger kids who I worked with gardening. My partner in particular, a 7-year-old, who was extremely knowledgeable. He told me about the edible and non-edible plants around us, the red and white clovers, and how and when to eat them, and more. I asked him how he knew all of this, and he said, I read a lot. Later, he told me about his plan. He's growing his own garden and going to start a green stand on the side of the road to give away the produce he grows to those in need. This just touched my heart. This boy, 7 years old, is already so aware and is making an impact on his community. There was also a little girl who was 3 years old, who whenever she saw potatoes when we were digging for potatoes, got very excited when she saw one on the ground. This spark and passion and energy inspired me. At 3 years old, she was able to tell me her favorite vegetables. This gave me the idea to, 1, educate our lower school students about where food comes from, eating healthy and gardening. 2, start our own school garden and give the produce to the local Rome Action Ministries Food Bank, McHenry Elementary School, and to those students' families at Darlington who are in need. Possibly start a garden at the Boys and Girls Club as well. These are just a few ideas that I wanted to share with you. I am very passionate about decreasing the percentages of food insufficiency in our community and beyond. I realize this is not an easy or simple task, but this is something I hope that we can do. Thank you to everyone in this room here today. I really appreciate the time and effort Rotary puts into creating a leadership program for teenagers. Thank you for making it possible for me to participate in RILA. Thank you.
Before you step away, we have a gift for you. It's called Hero. It's a book of quotes on being a hero. Thank you very much. And now John Olson will introduce our program.
Well, folks, the bad news is that I have the Rotary moment today, and the good news is that I'm not doing it. I am, however, going to introduce our speaker. I'm going to be brief so as not to eat into his time. Our speaker hails from Lincoln County. He is a Rotarian in the Gastonia Rotary Club. He is serving currently his 6th term in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the 10th District. Please extend a warm Rotarian welcome to Patrick McHenry.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the warm introduction, and I'm sorry I'm not here on I'm not a member of the club, so I can't really speak to your Rotary Moment capacity. But there is a back left table here who did, so I think I'm really sad I can't say anything more. But thanks for the warm introduction. Thank you all for having me here today. President John, thank you as well. But it's really hard to follow a great speaker. And so, Lily, you've made my job much tougher here today. You have quite a capacity, and it's really wonderful to experience your leadership and your contribution you're bringing back to our community and what you learned from your experience this summer. So, thank you, Lily. And I'm really upset with you. Good afternoon. So let me first begin by saying I am not here to talk about the presidential election. That usually gets a round of applause. And I have no news to bring you, whether or not, on the presidential election, but I'd like to talk to you about some other things that are happening in Washington and give you an update from my perspective on some things that have been achieved. Now, if you turn on the TV, listen to the radio, the full consumption of American politics is around two big personalities that the American people know and love. Know. And while that is being consumed, while the American populace and our whole thought process, in political thought process, is focused on that, there have been some positive things that have happened with positive outcomes legislatively in Washington, and bipartisan compromises that have been achieved. But I want to give you a little update on the work that I've been doing and a few things that are perhaps positive steps dealing with some of our nation's key challenges. First, I serve, my number one job for you is to be your voice in Washington. And that means here at home having good folks like Nancy Meek and others in my office here to deal with constituent casework, which we do on a regular basis. My main office is here in Hickory, and I've got talented folks there that deal with whether it's a Social Security issue or a disability issue, a veterans benefit issue, or as simple as getting a flag flown over the United States Capitol. We take care of that on a daily basis. And then I have competent staff, and Sean is one who is here as well from Washington, that work on legislative matters that are important for our region, important for local governments, important for our people, and also important for national policy making as well. I serve on one committee. I'm the vice chair of the Financial Services Committee, which deals with the regulation of banks, Wall Street, from real estate to very complex financial products. And I serve as the number 4 in leadership of the House of Representatives, so with the title of Chief Deputy Whip. If you watch House of Cards, it's just like that. The only difference is my job would be far easier if I could actually murder people. But it's my job to work with the whip in the House. I'm basically the COO of the whip and counting operation, which you work with policy and you work with members to count votes and get better outcomes, or seek better outcomes. That doesn't mean we succeed every day, but that is the goal. But my work on the Financial Services Committee, the discussion that we have about banks, credit unions, and high finance is one of sophisticated products. The motivation I have to be your voice in Washington on these matters, on these important matters of regulation of financial products, is not born out of those complex products. It's much more the background I have and where I grew up. I grew up in Gastonia. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My father had a friend down the street who had 5 kids. The commonality they had was they didn't have enough money, and they were always looking for some other opportunity to succeed and to help their families. And so out of that, my father and his buddy got a contract to mow grass. And they got this contract to mow a few hundred acres. And they both, combined, they had 2 push mowers and a plug-in weed eater. So they had to get creative. And they went to a salesman who was selling Toro lawnmowers. Now, this is nearly 40 years ago now. Went to a salesman who was selling Toro lawnmower. My father made less than that Toro lawnmower cost. Made less the previous year than that Toro lawnmower cost. So he had to work with the salesman and said, actually, if you'll just let us borrow this for the weekend, right? And so after doing that a few times, he was in business. His second piece of equipment was a truck to put that lawnmower in the back of. And he got that truck with a mastered charge. Now, this is where I grew up, and this is how I grew up. The one thing my father had was time. The other thing he had was, let's face it, with 5 kids, you got labor, free labor. And so that was the business I grew up working in. And I think about this because, I've had the opportunity to serve Catawba County for the last 6 terms in the United States Congress, and that is what motivates me more than anything, more than my business experience, though brief, doing real estate before I got elected to Congress. much more instructive to the way I think on a daily basis about public policy. And then I look around the room here among Rotarians, among community leaders and business leaders. That's much more applicable to us than the regulation of derivatives, to the regulation of complex financial products, and credit default swaps, and all this high finance that people want to talk about on CNBC. The practical reality for us here at home is centered around how small businesses and how families can make ends meet and perhaps take a little more risk for a little better outcome. And so the focus I've had is trying to relieve some of that burden. And we've had some positive steps. A new way of finance through investment crowdfunding, using the internet to invest in small businesses. That's legislation that I champion. I wrote and we're able to get it signed into law. That is being legalized. That is legalized now. And the Securities and Exchange Commission has written the rules, and that will be happening much more broadly on the internet. It's a positive sign and a relief from the regulatory burden that community banks and credit unions have been feeling at the expense of jobs. That is one area that there's been some positive outcome and some relief, so that there can be some additional ways to get investment and to get lending. But more broadly than that, I just want to touch on really 4 things that have been achieved in the last year that perhaps we haven't heard much about. We have the first long-term highway bill in the United States, first long-term highway bill in the last 5 years. In the last 15 years, the first long-term highway bill we've had. And that is a good thing for 321. It's a good thing for ensuring Highway 16 is built out and connected up to I-40. It's a really important thing for our infrastructure here in North Carolina, and with the changes the state legislature has made with how we build important national and statewide infrastructure. Highway bill. Bipartisan, signed in, went through a Republican House, Republican Senate, and signed by a Democrat president. That is a success. It's a success for America and our competitiveness internationally. Not covered, but important. Education. Education. The mandate of using Common Core as the curriculum for all educational institutions came out of Washington, and we ended the mandate of Common Core on our local school boards and our states. We also significantly changed No Child Left Behind, so that states like ours don't have to have this redundant testing regime that is taking time away from teaching and putting it into test taking, and the stress that puts on our academic institutions, and worse outcomes because more tests means you have less time to actually teach students. We achieved that in a bipartisan way and got that done in the last year. Now, those are 2 areas that are very important for the long-term success of our country and our competitiveness. Now, you also have a significant change in the way we pay doctors and hospitals via Medicare, via Medicare. And that was an enormous bipartisan success that was achieved in the last year. Again, unheralded but important. And finally, what was just signed into law a few weeks ago by President Obama was a major change in both law enforcement and healthcare, and the coordination between the two in dealing with the opioid crisis that we're feeling here in Western North Carolina, acutely here in Catawba County, but across this whole country, not a community is unaffected. And for those of you who don't think that we have an opioid crisis, or that you don't know someone who has faced this, it is real, and we all know someone who has been touched by the opioid crisis. This is not just heroin, illicitly sold heroin, but it's prescription drug abuse. And so what we addressed in a bipartisan way was a major change to the way healthcare professionals and law enforcement coordinate at the national level, but also opening up those avenues here at the local level as well. It means the recovery drug can be much more widely distributed, and the law enforcement professionals have legal protection to actually administer those life-saving drugs if someone overdoses, and they can save their life. Those are important changes, And I bring them up not because they're the most exciting changes or that people are going to stand up and cheer, but it should be noted that we can actually make progress even in a highly divided time in American politics. Now, you didn't hear me talk about health care. You didn't hear me talk about tax policy. You didn't hear me talk about balancing the federal budget. You didn't hear those things. Those things will be resolved by the next national election. And the American people, at the end of the day, are the sovereigns that make the final decision on the direction of our country. We're living in a highly divided time politically. That's not news to say that. But what is news is that there is always hope, because at the end of the day, every 2 years, we have control over our government. And for those of you who say there is no change in sight, just rewind. If you're a Republican in 2005 and you looked at the cover of Newsweek or Time magazine, it said permanent Republican majorities in Washington. And in 2009, those same institutions had a picture of a sad elephant sitting on a bench, looking just completely dejected because Republicans could never win again. Well, it's a mixed bag, but the final outcome always rests with the American people. And if you don't like the direction our country's going, realize that you have the final say. That you have the final say. And that's the reason why I'm hopeful, is because you, my bosses here at home, have the final say on the direction that we go as a community, as a state, and as a nation. That's the reason why I'm hopeful, not because I see what's happening on CNN or Fox News. So with that, I'd love to have your questions or your comments, if we do have the time. John?
Yeah, we've got time.
Good, very good. All right. Libby, thank you for being here to keep an eye on me and to report back to my wife if I've said something offensive. Don't worry, Libby will tell me tonight. You shouldn't have said that. So,
Your take on HB2?
my take on HB2. I'm not a member of the state legislature. And
state.
what's that?
It's seriously affecting our state one way or
No,
another.
I understand. But I'm not a member of the state legislature. And so I didn't vote on it. I certainly have answered more questions about it than I would, quite frankly, in the last couple of months I've answered more questions about potties at home and at work than I ever expected. Now, I do have a 2-year-old at home, and that potty conversation is much more fruitful than this public conversation we have. The absurdity of us regulating at the state or federal level restrooms, to me, is really not becoming of who we are and what our government should be about. That's one. Two, we've had overreach after overreach. Overreach by the Charlotte City Council, overreach by the state legislature, and overreach by the federal government. All three have overreached the bounds. As a federal office holder, I have a greater say in the federal matter. I don't think bathroom policy should be directed out of Washington. The Supreme Court actually issued a stay yesterday on this on the policy the president put in place in response to HB2. It was a Virginia litigant in that matter, but that affects us here in North Carolina as well. I think in this matter, cooler heads must prevail. Cooler heads must prevail, and at the end of the day, when I meet with school board members and superintendents, they have a very different perspective. So while there's talk at the federal and state level about policies, they have to implement it. And they don't implement it on high. They actually have to look students and parents in the eye. And that is a dramatically different thing. What I take a great deal of satisfaction in knowing is having had those conversations with superintendents, they were doing the right thing before this controversy arose. And they were doing everything, their dead level best, to do what was right for students, all students, but particularly whatever the student in question was, their families, and the teachers involved. And that makes me so proud of the people that are working for us on a daily basis. The teachers, the principals, the administrators that are just have been doing the right thing and struggling with this. But doing it in an unsung way, and not to go make headlines, but to do the right thing for that child. It's hard enough to be a teenager. It's hard enough to be a teenager. Yes, sir.
Could you expand a little bit on the legislation you talked about for teachers? That's the biggest thing that we hear from them is the oppression of the test and assessment. How much real relief is that going to give? Is there state rules too, I guess?
Well, we'll see a nice change this year, this school year, but it'll be the following school year that I think we'll see a greater difference in result. So let's rewind. In 2001, President George W. Bush, his signature legislation was No Child Left Behind. That took the Texas-based testing regime, the Texas testing regime he put in place as governor, into place at the national level, and mandated this broad array of testing on outcomes. Well, I think it's important to make sure that we're getting the outcomes that we desire and getting the results. That's important. Now, but rewind. So where did that Texas governor get his idea for testing? Jim Hunt in North Carolina. It was not George W. Bush's idea. So the accountability regimes that Jim Hunt put in place during his governorship were the model for Texas, and the model for Texas was the model for the nation. What all that did was put a second layer on North Carolina of tests that we already had an accountability regime, and we're already demanding results from our educational institutions, and so all that did was take away days of educating and turning it into more days of testing. So we've suffered under this, and teachers are rightfully aggrieved for having to suffer under that. So the first thing that our education reform led law does is recognize state-based testing regimes. Recognizing it and saying if you have an accountability regime, that is accountability enough, and we will be able to judge and measure across jurisdictions due to actually big data, actually using data across these regimes and being able to measure. Okay, that's one. Two, the additional mandates that are put on the states and localities, in particular on Common Core, as I mentioned, are now relieved. The federal government cannot grant or withhold funds based off the utilization of any one curriculum. Those are the two biggest successes in this legislation. There is more parental choice across public schools, mandated from the federal level, which is a significant change. Again, that'll be not this school year. The following school year, we'll see more of that. But that's the top line. I'm happy to talk more with you about it afterwards.
Any other questions?
Sorry,
Michael.
Do Republicans actually have a replacement health care plan, or is that just something that's threatened, or is there actually something sitting in a file somewhere that can be plugged in the event that,
Well, thank you, Michael. What do you know about health care? A career, you know. No, thank you for the question, Michael. I couldn't tell you this a year ago, that we had a unified, agreed-upon plan. As a Republican, I couldn't say that my party was unified around a replacement plan. The debate was, Obamacare, not Obamacare, right? I voted against Obamacare. That's going to be no surprise to anyone in this room, right? What is a surprise is now we actually put together an agenda. House Republicans have put together an agenda. Speaker Ryan and a large group of us have put together an agenda, and we have agreed among House Republicans that this is our agenda for governing. It's detailed, and as a part of this, we have a detailed approach to health care. It is not simply saying we oppose Obamacare. It is the additional steps of what are the things that we were going to do to improve health outcomes for society? What are we going to do to ensure that the least among us have access and have a reasonably affordable access to health care? And that is a fundamental shift in debate, I think, than simply saying, I want to take this policy out and replace it with that policy. It is much more, let's step back and look at all the changes we should seek as a society for better health outcomes for our people and better treatment of our people in that process, and making sure that those the least among us still have the access to the best quality care in the world. So it's called A Better Way, available on my website, but this is what I've spent a lot of time talking about. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to pull it out of my pocket. But that is something that Speaker Ryan has been the champion of in the House, and this discussion that we're attempting to have on policy amidst the debate on personalities at the presidential level. So let me just close with this, and thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to be here. But let me go back to my final point I attempted to make in my speech. The American people are in charge. The American people are in charge. Voters make the decision on who the elected officials are, and the elected officials should be held accountable every election. Whether it's a 2, 4, or 6-year term, we should have accountability in this process. Accountability means day-to-day vigilance, paying attention and feedback, and demanding of results. And when the American people realize their power and their strength, I think we'll have better outcomes with our government. It is not about dismissing the political process and saying it's broken. We are in charge as voters, and we need to make sure that we make our voices heard, whether you're a liberal or a conservative or you're not sure. To make a decision about the direction of our country rests with us. That is what gives me hope, because I know that my constituents, you, my bosses here at home, are more engaged than ever before and paying attention to every vote and demanding better outcomes. And out of that demanding for better outcomes, we will get better outcomes. Thank you for the opportunity to represent you. God bless.
Thank you, Congressman. In appreciation for your being here, we have a coin for you about the four-way, with the four-way test on the back.
Very good. Thank you.
We appreciate your service.
Thank you.
And now, Chief Tom, or retired Chief Tom, has our Service Above Self Scholarship raffle.
We have 27 cards, one joker. We took in $58 for a total of $1,597.
Oh, no. Help us out. Somebody's going to like me and everybody else is going to hate me.
2635. 2635.
John Bates. Verify. It is indeed 2635. Okay, oh, 10 of diamonds. Free lunch for you. Thank you. I forgot to mention at the top of the meeting, but on your table you have information about Amber Clausen. She is being considered for membership. So please feel free to grab that and take that with you, since I forgot to tell you to read it during the meeting. We'd like to thank visiting Rotarians and guests of Rotarians for joining us today. I hope that you will come back to see us again. This is membership month, so please bring guests that we can eventually recruit into membership. And please remember to put coins, dollars, checks, or negotiable securities, fine jewelry in the cart buckets. And now let us close with the four-way test.
Of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?